Now we're back into it. This is the first session back. We had 3 a few months ago, and Patty here is the first one this time around. So I'm really chuffed to be launching these sessions again with her, because Sessions from the Edge is the sort of place where it allows voices like yours to be heard. And the reason I say that is because if you've read the book, you'll know that a Titan, which is the title I use for people collectively associated with chronic conditions, a Titan is not just somebody with a condition like myself. A Titan is also the carers that work with them, and in Patty's case, a practitioner. So each session, I try and choose a guest from within my network on Substack who are either I do apologise if I cough occasionally through this presentation. Please don't be concerned. I've just got a flu that's still hanging around. But anyway, they are either that Titan, that carer, or that functional health practitioner. And Patty falls right into that functional health practitioner mindset and capability. So really pleased that she's here, because you're not broken. You're just being rebuilt all the time. And that's what people like Patty are here for. And today we're talking about one of the most stressful, overwhelming, and difficult processes involved in rebuilding ourselves and dealing with a diagnosis. And what I'm talking about here is the medical appointments. Now, one of the hardest things to do is to put together the concept of what we have to talk about. How can we get our medical professional to provide us with the right information? Are we ready to receive that information? And we're going to do the most we can with that information. So that's the sort of things, the waiting rooms, the rushed conversations, the feeling of being on the clock because, you're paying for their time. And that strange freeze that happens the moment the door closes and it's just you and the practitioner. So our guest today, is Patty Wallen, and she's built a system that changes all of that. She teaches people, she teaches people how to walk into an appointment with clarity, with confidence, and a structure that clinicians instantly recognize as respect. Because if you've read my book in chapter 14, it talks about putting together your team of professionals and your team of support. And it's very important that you get those people who are the professionals on the other side of the room on your side. So, you're the champion, and you've got to go in there with confidence and with empathy of the stuff that they have to go through as professionals. The hospital system, we know, anywhere in the world is underfunded, undertimed, and so on. So there's all these sorts of issues involved. So you're not just walking into a room for yourself, you're also walking into a room trying to get something achieved with them in mind as well. And so we'll talk about those sort of things. Patty's work in the practice side of that philosophy, she shows how to make an appointment a conversation, not a crisis. So, Patty, welcome. It's great to have you here. I'm really pleased that you accepted the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Well, my pleasure, and thank you for the asking.
Oh, that's right. So, before we get into the deep stuff, I have to ask, what's the strangest sort of appointment that you've had to help people with?
Wowie. The strangest, huh?
Or quirkiest or funniest, like when you go there talking to them, you're going, oh dear, all right, how do we deal with this?
Well, I have more years of working as the provider in many, many, many kinds of settings, while I only have a few years of doing health coaching, and this program is only barely 2 years old. So I have a bigger bank of how many odd encounters I've had than I have. But I guess part of it, Paul, is that nothing surprises me. Nothing seems odd to me because I've seen the most bizarre things for a dozen years. So I don't have a mind like that. I mean, I might go, uh-oh, wake up, better, who do I talk to? Is what happens inside of me rather than, oh, this is bizarre, because almost everything is bizarre inside of medicine.
So, okay, let's then think about the person who hasn't done any preparation and who is just walking into a consult for the first time. Where do people usually lose clarity?
Waiting room.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And maybe they never had it in the first place, because I think the thing that really has driven me to make this work available and to make it kind of a special niche for me is that people have no idea that they really do need to prepare. And I'm not just talking about making a list of questions.
Mm,
Um, a simple way to think of it is most people, if they prepare to go to an attorney, they know that if they don't get their act together, they're going to get a lot more bills just for this one appointment, because phone calls and time to read letters and time to write letters, you get charged for every single thing an attorney does. And for
mm.
some reason in medicine, it's like, you got 15 minutes to make your buck, and then you have to do all this other work without any pay. That's kind of how the medical system oddly has done it. Even though there's even more education for a medical provider than an attorney at times. So people just don't grasp that there is too much for any one person to do to get a really good job done. So by being familiar with your own case and understanding some of the language and having a nice systematic way to prioritize and organize your needs, you're going to have a lot more going, and you're going to get a lot more done in a very short time. So there may be no focus to begin with, but the system again makes people think, the system's going to take care of me. So it's a real innocent. It's an innocent failure. I think the people are set up to expect to be taken care of, but unfortunately, with things like fast food, drive-through drugstores, everything is all about the one pill, the 5-minute wait. And, so I began to see that people actually do think fast food medicine exists, and it really doesn't. So it really isn't fair, but that's kind of the reality that I witnessed.
And what are some of the thoughts and emotions that you've consulted with people on in terms of them going into those meetings and those appointments before they start using your system?
Well, the most common is anxiety
Yeah.
and hesitance. Some people have actually been traumatized in a lot of different ways, um, but overwhelm, don't know what to say. You forget everything you were going to say, even if you wrote it down because you sat for too long, or there were interruptions even in during the meeting with the provider.
Mm,
People just are dead. They don't know how to navigate because they don't have it. They have no sense of control. There's no sense of how can I, um, you know, manage this. And it's not that anybody has control, but you can have more influence, and you can have a purpose and a goal and an outcome in mind, that's very respectful and very likely to happen if you understand, as you said very nicely, consider what the pressures are on the person in front of you, the many people that they have to deal with behind the scenes, and what they can and can't do realistically. And that's the other thing, is people have a lot of unrealistic expectations of providers sometimes.
yeah. And so let's unpack that a little. The other side of the table. What do clinicians have to work with? I mean, there's a whole system behind it, but how does that system work? Because your role in terms of what you do in with your training and so on, it helps people unpack all of that and understand that. Could you just highlight sort of, just give us an overview?
Well, first of all, people need to retain their license. So, depending upon what region they're in, um, the reality is, the USA has, the lawyer in the room, so to speak.
Mm,
And I think there's a few other countries where lawsuits can happen, but maybe the US has the biggest take on that. But there are things like if you're going to have a license of some sort, there's some kind of a governing board, and there's some kinds of different organizations that have guidelines that are supposed to be guidelines for the provider to choose between the patient and provider, but it's very sticky, especially if a patient isn't forthcoming with their information and they don't seem to be engaged and they're not demonstrating that they're following through on anything. So that leaves a provider to have to cautiously act within the guidelines that might not really match the person's need because the need isn't really clear. When you build a relationship with someone and you're really authentic about your needs and you're both listening to each other, that's where individual decisions can be made. So, in order for people to keep their license, sometimes you have to act as if the guideline is the standard of care, which is what it's claimed to be. So, that's one example. Um, there's all kinds of accounting, and I think that's different in each system. There's different kinds of compensations that some systems get because the more healthier people are, the better your pay. So somehow there's always some kind of data that has to be generated from the experience. So when a person in the provider point of view is creating their document, whatever form that is, no matter whether it's written or electronic, um, there's going to be a lot of eyes on it, and that's one of the things that a person knows. They're doing gymnastics in their mind, first of all trying to get the information, and secondly needing to put it in such a way that all those different silos they have to respond to are going to understand. So it's a lot more than
mm.
people realize.
Yeah, it is quite a lot more. I mean, we go in as patients, we go into a room thinking that that person is just there to satisfy our needs, but in fact, the demands for them are actually much deeper. For those of you who've just joined us, I'm talking to Patty Wallen, who actually is talking about the role of communication in and the steps and tools to go into consultations for your condition, your chronic condition, because this is about decoding your diagnosis. So we're talking about those medical visits. Pardon me. And Patty has been in the medical system as a practitioner for decades, first as a chemist and then working in family practice and more recently as a certified health coach, and now with a course which we'll talk about a little bit later. And what we're trying to do is work through that overwhelm and those forces that come upon us when we go into a consult with a practitioner, because not only is it pardon me, about our condition and trying to get a fix for that, but it's also all the other layers of what I call forces out of the book, the forces that are impacting us from outside and within. And so as a person with a condition, you're really concerned about the appointment because, you know, I can recall when I was diagnosed with severe heart disease. You look at all the stuff and you don't have a short lifespan if you don't get it right. So, you've got that anxiety going in there, which is an internal force. And then you've got that 15 minutes that Patty was just talking about. So, and then all the requirements, the probity and the professional requirements of the practitioner themselves that they have to go through just to give you back the right answer. So, pardon me. So we're talking about, in this case, our titans, who are the people with the chronic conditions going into those situations, but also if there's any carers in the room, that role of the carer in that space as well, because quite often you're the memory for the person, because they're off thinking tangents that may or may not achieve the objective. So if a carer is in the room, they're also there to help and assist and possibly bring the person back on track, but not override the person in that consult situation. So let's talk about the chief complaint. What's the biggest problem that people have in terms of clarity?
Well, may I back you up a little bit and talk
Yeah,
about
sure.
the carer in the room? That's a
Yeah,
really big deal.
absolutely. Please do.
You were, the thing is, um, it's better to think in medicine about a team sport. It
Yes.
actually is much, much better. I wrote an article about what the elephants can teach us in an earthquake, because near my home is a San Diego Zoo and their safari park, and we had an earthquake recently, and the elephants actually demonstrated beautifully on camera, creating an alert circle. And that's
Mm.
something that all of us really need to have. And going to a healthcare appointment, even if you're not in a critical state, but just in general, creating a team with your providers, people who are known to the provider, they're going to be more relaxed, you're going to have more rapport, and there's going to be a sense of community. The thing is, it actually is a relief when there is a compatible, kind, compassionate, cooperative person, because, as you say, when you are the one in the hot seat, so to speak, you tend to forget. Even if you
Mm.
have it written and right in front of you, you tend to forget. And this person, if you've briefed each other well, can be a gentle reminder. Oh, but I remember you were going to talk about that happened. Oh, yeah. So it's a team. And that is wonderful. It makes it much faster to get the history done of what happened, the story clear, and things won't be as forgotten, and it won't take as long. So most of the time, this isn't true for everybody, but most of the time, providers welcome and assist, and there's usually at least two chairs in every room, that at least that I worked in. So that's a really important thing to begin to practice, and finding someone who's willing to come with you, who you can trust. That sometimes is kind of a tangle, but it would be a good idea. And you can do the same for them. You don't
Mm.
have to be deathly ill or have a, terminal disease to need a companion at your healthcare, to think about creating a team. Wouldn't it be great to have people who your provider already knew, and now you've got something new and serious to work with, and you've already got a bit of a team started? So I think that's a real important, and that's a good way to reduce the anxiety also for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. My wife has been with me through all of this, and I literally couldn't have done it without her. Can't keep doing it without her. It's we go in, we do prepare beforehand, and we go in there. I mean, a classic example is back when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And rather than waste time in the consults with the specialist about whether or not we would think about going with the prostatectomy, which basically essentially changes your sex life, for instance, forever. We had to talk about that long beforehand, so we've talked that through. We know what our answer is going to be, and it was a distinct let's just do it. Better to be alive than dead, um, so. So, those sort of conversations are really important. I agree 100%. Thanks, Patty. So going back to where was I? I was in a bit of
You were
I had a bit
asking
of
about
brain fog
chief
and flu,
complaint. That's
sorry.
okay. You were asking about chief complaint. You wanted to know something about.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Well, this is about the main reason for your visit. And this is something, at least in California, this is where I've practiced in many different types of settings. Many people, as do I, don't like to go to the doctor, so they figure, well, I'm here, so I'm going to try to get everything done. I don't have to come back again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so, so that does not work out too well. That fact usually ends up diminishing the kind of help you get. So 1 to 3 chief complaints is really three, 1 to 3 reasons, and be ready to make up another appointment for any of the other things and really follow through. But it's really just honing crystal clear. What are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that I need to talk about and have some kind of solution about that I can talk about in 5 minutes or less if you want to have any conversation? So that's, again, preparation is a real secret
Mm.
sauce for that.
That short question, that single or yeah, 1 or 2 questions. That's really important. Rather than rattling off a whole lot of symptoms and concerns, and that is interesting. Now, so we're talking about Patty's framework for preparing and taking notes in and so on, which I'll talk about later. But you mentioned you have an acronym in there called SOAP, which I find quite simple. What's SOAP all about?
Well, this is what the healthcare system uses to organize and prioritize information to keep track of things. So it's an acronym. I teach people how to do it from a patient point of view, which is not the
Mm,
usual view.
no.
So this is really, really different. It's new and novel, and but it's basically, a a way to organize material and learn along the way as you're organizing the material, and then uh, having an understanding of yourself, your own condition. And the other thing is that it makes you pay attention to what details do you need to bring. And
Mm,
this is what people don't do. People don't think, well, let's see, what's been happening and when did it happen and how many times did that happen and what did I do for it and how did it work? So they don't even think about all of that. So when you think about it ahead of time, you can organize it in a more professional fashion. But it's actually just it's not something that's rocket science, but it does require skill building, and it does require some practice and some time.
and is it an acronym, or am I just making that up?
It is an acronym. It's S is for subjective, O is objective, A is assessment, and P is plan. That's the medical side. I have a few other things I add in from the
Lovely.
patient point of view in the course. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So we've got a plan, we've got objectives and so forth. Then where does the collaboration actually begin in the appointment? What do we do with this information? We come in here. Where do we start? How should we approach that appointment?
Well, this is where the non-linear work comes in, and you and I both have that sense of body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah,
I also work with emotion aspect, which is usually blended together somewhere in the body, mind, spirit world.
mind and spirit.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So self-awareness is really important. In fact, I think it's vital, and it's a skill that I feel strongly about for people, because one of the biggest reasons people don't survive preventable deaths, for example, heart attacks, is the lack of self-awareness and the tendency to go into denial and avoidance. So then by the time it's real apparent, sometimes it's too late, which is really sad. Well, that's not, the case when you've got, no major thing, but it's the same. If you don't really pay attention to what your body's been saying, how you've been feeling, how it's affecting your mood or your sleep, if you don't put those things together in a concise sort of way, you're not going to have time. You don't have an hour to converse and to remember and to, reflect. It's not that kind of an appointment. That's what I do
yeah.
in health coaching. That's why
Yeah.
health coaching is so valuable, because we can go through it all and sift and sort it, and I can help you do that thing in 5 minutes or less, but it took us an hour and a half maybe to get there.
Mm.
And that's how I teach people more skill and more savvy. But
Mm.
yeah.
And what's the biggest mistake people make that sort of throws the whole appointment away? That you've just wasted your time.
Well, I think this is, again, an innocent mistake, and that's that they don't really check their own mindset. They don't really recognize that they either have a default to expecting the provider to take care of everything. "Oh, don't you have all my medicines in your record? Don't you have all that? Don't you have all that?" I got that all the time. "Don't you have it? Why are you asking me?" Well, well, I'd like to be sure we're up to date. And so the problem is people aren't, again, thinking about the fact that a particular individual in front of a computer, it may or may not be connected to other information about you. The interface between different hospitals and clinics, and it's very scattered. It's very Swiss cheese like. And so if you come in thinking that they're going to have all that information and that you don't have to do anything, just show up and answer questions, that's uh, not realistic mindset is what I'm calling that. So
Mm.
so also, people rightly so feel angry at the medical system. They feel frustrated, they're overwhelmed, they're so tired. They've been waiting there for an hour and a half. They're supposed to get in, in 10 minutes, and here they're still here, and they're getting hungry and tired. So there's a whole lot of good reasons for people to feel that way. But unfortunately, the provider behind the computer has really nothing to do with all that. The
No.
way things have gone has just been, it's what happens. And if you're sitting with them and something happens, if your child has a seizure, or, you have a sudden, you know, emotional turmoil, you don't want them to just walk out of the room when the time is up. You want them to stay. So this is what happens. And again, so working with an awareness of your own mindset, your own expectations is really important. And if you do have a chance to get oriented on what kinds of things might be in a system, what kind of demands, what kind of hierarchy there is, then you can walk in going knowing that this person is stretched thin, wants to help you, and you can prime the conversation by having a well prepared story and a
Mm.
well prepared set of
Mm.
needs. And then you're going to be halfway done in 5 minutes, and you've got 10 to 15 more. You can really get somewhere. You can access their uh, depth of knowledge, rather than them just trying to fill in the checklist and covering their tail for keeping their license intact.
Yeah.
So not checking your expectations, not checking your mindset, not checking your own frustration, and checking it at the door is a good idea. But having a so why are you there? Why are you talking to them? What is it that you want from them? Getting really clear on that, and in a very kind and compassionate way, usually works better. It doesn't always. Not all providers come, feeling great, doing great. Some people have a lot of ego. That happens. But you're going to get a lot more out of anybody if you can show up prepared with certain kinds of language and with an expectation of partnering. Now, they may or may not partner with you, but if you come in expecting to partner and knowing that you know about yourself, that you're the center of this story and that you are the expert on what you've been experiencing, but you're only an expert if you've done your homework. And that's the
Mm.
thing.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, I was looking over the shelf there before because I've got one of those concertina sort of things that I carry into the appointments. Like I'll grab it. So, I've got this thing here and I literally go into, into appointments with that. Now, I don't necessarily use all that's in there because that's got, a full life history, blood works, all that sort of stuff. But at least, because you're right, one thing that happens is that you basically, when you're going in, certainly in those very early stages at the first point of diagnosis or just after, you're suffering grief, and you're going through those 5 or 7 stages, depending on whose sort of philosophy you follow. But you're going through these stages of grief. So you're angry, as you said before. You're in denial, and then quite often you're bargaining with them as well. Oh, have I really got cancer? Can this really kill me? No, 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 sure, it's okay. These sort of things go through your head. So if you've got something like that is the clear facts, even if you don't have a good relationship with the practitioner. I mean, I've got a practitioner who I have to have, and they've got the personality of I don't know, a brick wall has more personality, but but I go in there to that meeting and I have strict objectives, and I go in there and we talk about the actual objective things that we need to discuss, and it works with anybody, whether they've got a personality or not. So that's great, and you're absolutely right. Information is critical. The more informed you are, in terms of yourself, and the more information you can have with you to refer to, especially for chronic conditions that are rather severe, it's a great thing. So, oh, pardon me. What are some of the practical tools that you use in the process of the Titan and their appointment and talking to their clinicians?
Well, it's really pretty simple. Self-awareness, um, preparation of your story, um, making sure that you have got some kind of support behind you. Ideally, you're bringing a partner of some sort, and that you've gone through the process so that you are really sure you're aware of where you're at in time in your process.
Mm.
And um, and then you have some asks, and the asks aren't just questions, about this or that. It's, well, you know what? I know before that when I had this particular symptom, I did this, or I got this prescription, or I got referred to this thing. You know, I want to know, can I get that now? You know, you can come up with ideas of what you want. So again, a lot of it is really about doing your homework and being honest with yourself. Having This is why having an organized system makes it so quick. And I even have a little template that I call the quick note, which is a set of worksheets and then a very abridged 1-page sheet. And some people use it, some people don't, but they use it to organize themselves so that on one sheet of something they've got key phrases so that when they get there they remember all the key points. It's a little bit like giving a Toastmasters speech.
Yeah, sounds
And
much like it.
having, and having a crib sheet, because you do want to be engaged. If you can engage your person in front of you, you're going to make them more comfortable. They're going to remember more. They're going to access their skill base, and you yourself are going to relax more, and you're going to remember and even come up with questions you hadn't thought of before as you're
Mm.
listening to them. And I think this is the other thing. So many of the people that I've taught this realize that they've just been standing by. They've just been in line. Oh, I'm just like at the pharmacy, wait for my turn. Okay. And then it's kind of like a talking at and a talking at. And then, people notoriously do not take notes, which drives me a little crazy. Um, Please take notes. Or have your your partner take notes for you. Um, and then, so you really have a more full experience, and you can gain more from your own process, but you're going to evoke more out of the person in front of you.
Because that's what I was going to say. I was going to ask you, So once we have that clarity and we've done the preparation, what changes in the relationship with the clinician?
Well,
What
I
sort of
can tell you
notice?
a couple. I'll tell you a couple stories. How's that? Let's take
That
a look
sounds
at a couple of
lovely.
stories. Yeah.
Great day for a story.
So, one of my wonderful students, um, lovely person, always, shows up, didn't do the kind of preparation like this. She'd never even thought of it, of course. She would just show up, and she, for example, she had a allergist that she'd been seeing for a few years because she had a sinus issue, and they did some initial testing, and so she had to go every 6 months to go check in. And she said, "Well, it's just always kind of the same thing, and I kind of say the same thing, and he tells me about the same thing, and writes me a prescription I don't really want, and da da da." So she's kind of like, "Oh gosh, here I got to go again." And then she realized when she took my course, she goes, I guess I could get ready, and I could bring some more information, and oh, maybe I could ask him about this, that, and the other. I never really did that before. And so when she went in with this very concise, you know, couple of things on her, chief complaint and very organized symptoms and even some evidence of her symptoms, some timelines, she said he sat down and leaned forward and said, "Okay, we can work with this." Well, she'd never brought any information. She'd never shared anything of different nature than the usual little report. And she said she left there a changed person. She finally understood what I'd been telling her about getting prepared, about getting the skill. She said, "I no longer felt like a bystander. I felt like I was an important part of my healthcare team." And she hasn't looked back since. So everybody she sees now, she has a deep and meaningful connection with, and they are leaning in and spending more time, and she's getting so much more help than she ever got.
And that's very important that people see themselves as a bystander in their own outcome. That shocks me. It's I've seen that plenty, and I've heard that plenty, and it just shocks me every time. It's like, hang on, this is your outcome. It'll either shorten your life or extend your life or end your life. I mean, there's some pretty serious with chronic conditions. They're all serious, right, in terms of their impact, and how people can just be bystanders in that is. So so when people are thriving, when they have really nailed it, they've got all the information, they've done the things. What does that look like in terms of the medical relationship and in terms of the outcomes that they can start seeing?
Well, number one, you realize that you're the boss. You are the decision maker. And this is something that is implied, at least in the US. We've got HIPAA and you've got supposedly informed consent, which is kind of, well, I don't know. Um, so there's this implication that the patient is the decision maker, and in actuality they are, because you have to sign your house away
Same here
to
in
get
Australia. Yep.
to get
Yep.
anything done. But I know that a majority of people don't understand, and they don't
Mm.
ask. They just do it, either because they're overwhelmed, they know that the bureaucracy is gonna exhaust them, they don't feel like anybody really cares. Again, this is what I say in my little, 2-minute, "Why did I make this course?" on my sales page.
Mm.
I just watched for so many years how the system divided patients and providers. So, there's this invisible wall between them, and there's not really a relationship formed unless you have a very gregarious two people sitting in front of each other, or a very studious, one that knows how to connect with that other person. Because these are, we're all people. So it's just really important to understand that the system itself, the traditional system, is what even functional medicine has some traditional to it. And this whole idea of of the patient doesn't know enough to be able to make a decision, so I'm going to have to explain everything to you, is such a incorrect setting, especially these days. We have too much information. And now people are coming in. One of the problems is people come in, AI is not accurate. It's not safe to just do an AI. You really got to have some knowledge, some knowledge base, and some skills to research effectively, to prepare effectively, to understand the layout. Um, so this is like, why do people go to real estate people? Oh my gosh, would you really want to go through a whole real estate course to be able to buy a house? Um, you it's not quite that bad when you have someone like me who knows how to organize it and simplify it. But when people start to realize that it's the system, it's not the person in front of you, and also to start checking on what is it you're thinking. People say, "Well, don't they have that? Why wouldn't they do that?" And it's like, no, no, that's some kind of a judgment or an assumption that you've made, that you would like it to happen, and that the system, not the provider, has sort of implied they're going to handle it. So
Mm,
I think the system is very sneaky in suppressing patients' agency. And that's one of
right.
my biggest messages. It's not really your fault, but it is your job. So, just like you said, if you end up getting, heart failure or, type 2 diabetes or whatever, okay, well, there's, you can be miserable and die soon, or you can, do something about it, change your lifestyle, discover what your needs are with a team and more than
Mm,
one provider, and start to discover, what does your body need and how can you live more comfortably with some more joy, with quality, before we're all going to say bye-bye one of these days. There's no, there's no, that's not negotiable. But the type of time that we spend and the type of quality we spend, that really is up to us. But this is the lifestyle issue forever. You can take a horse to water
but you
and make
can't
them
make
drink.
them.
We
Yeah.
all have these, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then next year we have it on our list again in January, so we're human. We're human. So my sense is, let's be compassionate with ourselves about that. Let's be compassionate with our providers, and remember that there's something over both of us that's impacting both of us. So try to get that out of the room. Get yourself organized, take charge, decide that you're going to own your health, become a titan. I love that. I love that metaphor. I think that's perfect
Thank you.
metaphor. I just call it, you're a health keeper. Okay. It came to me many
Yeah.
years ago. I took my first coaching class, like I think in 2012, with Dr. William Sears, who I just adore. And as I was driving along, I thought, well, we got, housekeepers and bookkeepers and zookeepers. Well,
Ah.
housekeeping is kind of the same thing, isn't it? It's boring, it's messy, it's every day, 24/7 for every day of your life. And that's where I came up with the housekeepers idea. So how you keep it, I mean, sometimes our housekeeping is good and sometimes it's not, you know, that's going to be true of our health. We're going to be really on it, on it, on it. Things are going to go great. And then, something happens and then we get distracted, or we have an accident. Now we can't exercise for 6 weeks and, oh my God, we got to start over again. I mean, this is life, right? But bottom line is, it's our project. This is my home. This is my mobile home, right? And how I keep it, is going to change the quality of my life.
Oh, absolutely. Which is great, a great segue, because Patty and I have been talking about collaborating past this conversation, as I do with the other fire starters. We have a conversation off screen about what potential collaboration could there be in the future with that person's expertise or that person's experience. Now, I'm really, really privileged that Patty has considered to bring her course into the coaching and course systems that I'm developing and launching very shortly as the second phase past, the writing of this book. So the title of Patty's course that we'll bring into the Codex campus is Own Your Health. And it's about transforming your appointments in 6 steps. Patty, what are the 6 steps?
Well, the first step is you're going to ask yourself some key questions. And if anybody wants to go to my website, www.healthkeepersunited.com, and there at the bottom of the home page is a little thing you can go and get a free gift, and it's 5 key questions to ask yourself before your next appointment. And that is the setup. You're going to check your readiness, and you're going to prompt yourself for doing your homework. There's 5 questions, so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is going through this process of organizing your story, getting all of your data, and getting your looking at what you've gathered and going, okay, what does that mean? Where am I at? What do I need? What questions do I have? And then coming up with, so what do I want to happen? What do I think should happen? When do I think it should happen? Or do I just not know? And so you're going through all of these steps. And at the end, you're going to make a quick note. You're going to make your short cheat sheet. And then you're going to go back after you've done all of this, and you're going to go back and take that 5 questions, and you're going to do it again to make sure that you did your homework. And then you go, oh, and it's a way to kind of lock in. Yep, I understand what I need. I understand my story. I understand what's important. And now I'm ready. I'm going to make this little note, and I can have a good night's sleep and just show up with my little crib sheet.
And that's fantastic because really the beauty of that is that it stops you feeling rushed when you go in, you don't feel ignored, and you're not presenting doctors with a whole lot of irrelevant information. You've had some sort of think about it, plan about it, and so they're less confused, which is really important because then you get some good answers back out of them in those appointments. Well, that's absolutely fantastic, and that course will be bringing through the Codex campus we'll be bringing out. It's available on Patty's website right now, and I'll also be launching it out through the Codex campus in the new year. We're right up we're right up beside Christmas, so nothing will be coming out before then. But we'll have a look at that in the new year, and I'll keep you posted on that as well. Has anybody got any questions? I see we've got a few people in the audience here today, which is fantastic. There's some of yours and there's some of mine there, Patty, which is lovely. Thanks, Kelsmile and Neera from my side, Barb and so on.
I see Julie. Hello.
Yeah. So if there's no questions, do you have any last-minute reflections?
Well, just be aware that we can't wait for the health system to fix itself. Even if it did, the only appointment, the only interactions you can influence are the ones right in front of you, and you can transform those. That's the value of owning your health and getting organized in a really rational way. And then the other thing is, you know, feel free to follow me on Substack. I'm at Health Keepers United, and check my website out, and you can email me if you have any questions. And I see a question here: patient can do to change their experience.
Yeah.
So, what a patient can do to change their experience? Well, I gave you the example of my lady at the allergist. The having a support person that you can talk to about things is very helpful. One example of that kind of situation was one student was taking her husband to a surgery center for a procedure. Everything went fine. They were all prepared, and he went there. He had his procedure, and she was with him in the recovery space. And then after a time, the staff came in and started to tell them it's getting time to go. And they were a little taken aback because he wasn't feeling well. He was nauseous. He couldn't stand up. And they were sort of chirping a little bit about that. But I thought, well, they can't mean now. So they relaxed and waited a little while, but they kept coming back and kind of prompting them. They got more and more concerned. So she actually called me as, her health coach and said, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. They're telling me I'm afraid he's going to fall." And so basically, because of our relationship, got her to calm down, organize her thinking, kind of help her sort out what were the facts. And this is what I do a lot is I listen with you. I help you to hear yourself and your needs. And before long, she realized, well, of course he could fall. I got to tell him that. I can't take him if he's going to fall. So she went back and said, "I can't leave. This man is going to fall down." And they went, "Oh," and they went, "Fall? That's a big trigger word. Call the surgeon." He goes, "Well, of course, the guy needs a night over in the hospital. Put him in overnight, one little overnight with some supportive care, gave him a little chance, a little more hydration. In the morning, he was in perfect shape and got sent home." So having somebody who understands you, has your back, has some value, a health coach is a wonderful thing, or just someone else who knows your case, who can help you listen to yourself. Those are the things that people can do to change their experience. Build your team, learn some language, understand the settings, and build compassion in yourself for those that are working like crazy in the healthcare system. They're all overstretched.
Mm. That's the absolute truth. And with that, Patty, I think we'll close the session. And really, thank you very much for coming on to Sessions from the Edge, and thank you to the audience for jumping in. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And if you have any further questions, by all means, ask. Next week, I'll feature this interview with Patty and myself as in terms of the notes and so on that go out, the post and what have you that go out in next week's content. So I'll pause on the book in terms of the chapter key releases, and I'll just focus entirely on that. And so keep your eyes out on my Substack in terms of the Cypher Line, which is the newsletter that comes out on Sundays. We might even have Patty with a guest article in there. So keep your eyes posted, and yeah, we'll throw some notes your way as well to do it. You got any last minute thoughts,
I
Patty?
I just wanted to say one last little message, and that's that everyone deserves to be seen and heard accurately in healthcare. And we're part of the solution to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, guys. I know it's pretty late over in the East Coast and the States. It's probably about 11 o'clock or something now. And here in Australia, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. People have to pick up children and all that sort of thing from school or whatever. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Patty. And we'll see you again
Thank
next
you.
time on Sessions from the Edge. Namaste.
Take care, everybody. Bye. Thanks, Paul.